It's been about 4 months since the World Health Organization officially declared this outbreak of new disease a pandemic. And as we know, although it hasn't been completely abolished, some countries have handled the spread, or flattening the curve as a lot of people say, much better than others. At the time of this recording, worldwide there have been just under 11.7 million cases, 540,000 deaths, and 216 countries, areas, or territories that have been affected in some way. Although it appeared most countries were doing the right thing, some were more lenient than others, and it shows in the numbers. However, when looking at statistics, it's incredibly important to consider factors such as cases per person and in general how the government responded. Thankfully, there are some countries who have done a phenomenal job keeping their citizens and the rest of the world safe, with a few on this list not even recording a single death due to COVID. Today on Life's Biggest Questions, we're counting down the top 10 countries that beat coronavirus. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to LBQ. I'm your host for today, Jared Bronstein. And before we start this one off, I just wanted to plug Top 10 Central. It's a really fun channel full of laughs, so come swing on by. On another positive note, I'll be replying to some comments from a previous video, but for now, let's count down 10 countries who have done a good thing in ensuring the human race has a chance to defeat this thing. Starting us off at number 10, China. The country where it's believed the virus and disease originated, they managed to take action quickly after realizing they were dealing with something much more serious than just a flu. At the time of this recording, in total, it's believed 83.5 thousand citizens were infected, with 4,600 dying from the disease and 78.5 thousand or so recovering. Now, before I go any further, those numbers won't add up to a total of 83.5 thousand because it doesn't include those who are currently fighting an active case. Either way, it's fair to say China was one of the countries hit the hardest in regards to how fast the illness spread. And like I said earlier about factors such as those infected per person, well, China is a positive example of that, with a population of approximately 1.44 billion people. Not to throw shade, but for example, being compared to the United States, who has a population of 331 million, but has dealt with 3 million cases and 131,000 deaths, well, it's evident that China did something right to ensure the spread of the disease stopped in its tracks. And even with a recent spike in cases in Beijing, the country was quick to act and stop it right away. Number 9, Bahamas. On July 1st, they officially reopened the country for international travel, allowing tourists to come and go as they please, so long as they test negative for the virus. Like the majority of countries on this list, and the ones that have found a way to combat the spread of the sickness, the Bahamas used a phased approach to reopening their country. Phase 1 allowed for eased restrictions on who could enter the country, but limited it to international boaters, yachters, and private aviators, as well as citizens of the Bahamas, legal residents or homeowners who qualify for permanent residency, as well as immediate family members or significant others of any of those listed previously. This phase started on June 15th and was almost a test of sorts to see how the country handled the spread. Considering how they've recorded only 104 total cases with 11 deaths, and no new cases since June 20th, I'd say they did a great job handling this one. In fact, since late May, the country has seen a total of 8 new cases, so hopefully it's the last of them. Number 8, Trinidad and Tobago. Much like the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago found a way to not only stop the virus from spreading, but seemed to get ahead of things before it got really bad. With only 133 total cases, 8 deaths, and 117 recoveries, this country made sure to avoid any unnecessary illness and death after recording their first case on March 12, 2020. It seems the majority of positive cases actually came from a cruise ship that had an outbreak of disease. Of the 68 on board, 40 tested positive for COVID, which brought the country's total number of infected citizens to 49. However, they managed to ensure that things didn't get too out of hand by implementing social distancing and safety measures to keep their people safe. Since that spike of cases from the cruise ship, there was only one day when the country had 10 new active cases, and since mid-April, the country has only seen a total of 20 cases, which means in the last 3 months or so, they're averaging a new case every 3 days. Pretty impressive if you ask me, all things considered. I'm sure it won't be long until they get 3 months consistently without a case. At number 7, Cambodia. 141 confirmed cases, 131 recovered, 0 deaths. That's right, believe it or not, they're not the only country on this list with such an accomplishment. Now yes, it's fair to say with only 144 cases when compared to other countries, 0 deaths is almost expected. In a sense, you could question how Trinidad and Tobago, with 133 cases and 8 deaths, would be on the same list as a country with less cases and no deaths. But this list isn't necessarily about comparing countries to each other, it's about the countries who found a way to stop the virus and disease before it took over. Now I will say to start the video, I compared China and the United States, but that was more to further prove my point of population size not necessarily determining how bad the spread will be. Going back to Cambodia, it seems their effort to test for COVID, as well as their extensive contact tracing, allowed them to get a handle on things. They also received a lot of international support, and some feel they aren't being totally honest about their numbers. Regardless, from what we do know, the country hasn't been hit too hard. And we'll also be speaking on countries possibly holding back some data, but that's going to come at the end of this one. Number 6, Uruguay. With a total of 965 cases, 865 recoveries, and 29 deaths, Uruguay somehow managed to get a grip on the spread without even locking their country down. And considering how neighboring countries such as Brazil and Argentina have been seeing large spikes in cases, it's even more impressive. So what did they do? Well, after hearing about the first few cases cases in the country, the border shut down, and all unnecessary activities were restricted. Schools closed, people were told to stay at home, and a lot of public places were shut down. Considering how they took action sooner than later, it seemed the country was able to stop the spread, and as of this recording, are seemingly back to normal. They've opened borders, kids have been back to school for months, and their daily cases are averaging about 4 a day. Now halfway at 5, Iceland. With 1,880 cases aside from China, this country is the only one on this list thus far to exceed the 1,000 case mark. However, they've only seen 10 deaths and 1,850 recoveries, with 20 still currently battling the virus. For almost the entire month of May, they only saw a few new daily cases, and according to worldmeters.info, there has been a bit of a spike in daily new cases since June, but even with the small spike, they're still only averaging 3 new cases a day over the span of the last few months. They've seemingly also gone back to normal, although I'm not sure the old normal necessarily reflects the new norm. Still, citizens aren't required to wear face masks, nor are they required to social distance, and if you want to visit, you need to take a mandatory test. If you test positive, you gotta quarantine for 14 days. If you test negative, you could act like nothing ever happened. But considering how Iceland was one of the European countries initially hit the hardest in regards to cases per 100,000, which was 513, this may come as somewhat of a surprise. It turns out contact tracing allowed them to have a better understanding of who could be infected and who needed to quarantine, which ultimately led to the country having a more relaxed approach to reopening. On to number 4, Thailand. They had just under 3,200 cases, but as of late are averaging just 3 new cases daily. It seems the spread in the country mostly came from people who had recently traveled to Wuhan or were coming directly from the Chinese city. By the end of February, the country had a total of 42 cases, but by March things would go from bad to significantly worse when the country reported 188 new cases in a single day. This led to the government implementing a curfew for a short period of time and advising those who don't need to leave their homes to stay inside. Of course, social distancing and wearing a mask was recommended. They did go into a lockdown, but started to use a phased reopening approach in May, which has clearly worked as the country has managed to keep the amount of daily cases to a minimum, and people in general appear to be doing just fine. Number 3, Norway. Going into lockdown in mid-March certainly helped this country flatten the curve, as they've seen a total of 8,950 cases, 251 deaths, and 8,138 recoveries at the time of this recording. In regards to daily new cases, they're averaging about 10, which is a little higher than some of the others, but considering the measures they took to nip this thing in the bud, which included shutting down borders, schools, and any non-essential businesses, and forcing new arrivals to quarantine. It seems the country that took preventative measures, as in they told people who recently traveled with no symptoms they had to quarantine regardless, well, it seems to have worked out for the better. And at number 2, Vietnam. Yet another country with 0 recorded deaths due to COVID, Vietnam somehow managed to keep their citizens safe even though they border China. It's important to mention they also border Cambodia, who had a good handle on things. Then again, as evident with Canada and the United States, neighboring countries don't necessarily determine how much another country will be affected. Going back to Vietnam, it's believed they were able to keep their numbers low due to an early awareness of severity regarding the illness and a common understanding among the people that social distancing is incredibly important. They're believed to have had a total of 369 cases, 341 recoveries, and with 0 deaths, they certainly have done a phenomenal job at handling this. Now at number 1, New Zealand. They were one of the first countries to officially defeat COVID, with reports that they went 17 days without a new case, and the last person who was being treated had fully recovered. However, there are now new reports of the virus emerging in the country again, but that doesn't mean they didn't beat it. Considering how at one point they had no active cases, well, that sounds like a win to me. After officially being COVID-free, the country lifted all social and economic restrictions, with the exception of their borders. Yet it seems the new cases are coming from international travelers, who were allowed to travel abroad and required to quarantine for 14 days following their return. 2 women were given an exception to leave their quarantine early after returning, but it turns out they both tested positive. Another man escaped his hotel, where international travelers returning home are required to stay for 14 days, as he wanted to make a quick trip to the market. He's now being charged with a crime. Safe to say there's a reason New Zealand handled this so well. They didn't want to take any chances. Now before we wrap this one up, I do want to mention there are a few countries who claim they haven't had a single case of COVID. The few countries that haven't had any cases, at least according to them, include Marshall Islands, Samoa, Turkmenistan, and to no surprise, North Korea, as well as a few others. Now I'm not going to say that all of these countries are necessarily lying. To no surprise, a handful of the countries without any cases, or even the ones with relatively low numbers, are remote islands, and that includes a lot of the ones on this list. Or they're just countries that don't necessarily border other countries in a physical sense. Large bodies of water separate them from other regions. Specifically, Marshall Islands and Samoa are among those countries, but other countries such as Turkmenistan and North Korea may not be telling the truth, or at least the full truth, regarding their data. Turkmenistan specifically just denied a recent outbreak which is believed to be COVID, and they're apparently silencing their healthcare workers as per the Human Rights Watch. Regarding North Korea, well, I think we also know what the deal is there. I can't say for sure that they've been dealing with it, but considering how Kim more or less decides what the rest of the world knows about his country, well, why would he admit to something that would make him appear to be an incompetent leader? Now, as always guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. It's definitely good to know a lot of countries have found ways to battle this pandemic, but others are still struggling. Hopefully we can find a way to end this thing once and for all, sooner than later. Let me know your your thoughts on this one down below, but for now, let's reply to some comments from the video. What if Kanye West became president? AlleyCatGTZ said, there needs to be actual qualifications to run for president. I think there actually is. I think you need to have a high school, or maybe it's a college, university degree. I don't know about that. I don't know about education, but you gotta be an American citizen for sure. I don't think you have to be born in the States though. I don't think. I think you just be an American citizen. Not for sure though. I'm pretty sure just American citizen. Ethan Imes said, then so help the American people. I don't know though. I feel like at the end of the day, like, the president isn't, I don't want to say as important as you guys think, but like the Senate really like controls a lot more than people realize, I guess. I don't know, like even if Kanye somehow did win, he couldn't just pass whatever law he wanted. Like realistically, he'd probably be impeached faster than we even tried to impeach Trump. So like, I don't know why, why this is getting so much like gravity. Even the Avengers said, oh my god, I just realized if he got president, then Kim Kardashian would be the first lady. Oh no. You know what? She got a law degree. I feel like people don't give her enough credit, and I feel like she kind of plays into this whole like, I don't know. I don't think she'd be that bad of a first lady. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. I've been your host, Jared Bronson. You've been watching LBQ. We'll see you in the next one.